You're crying. Do we have your crying on tape?
Also that.
Is it again another quarter you missed?
Yeah,
Mikkel?
exactly.
Everyone will ask that question now. So Tony and Mikkel talking about Mikkel crying because he missed another quarter.
Yeah, it's also just because I'm being abused in the podcast all the time,
right.
being the fall guy.
Hey,
the
you were the
CEO who
CEO.
doesn't miss,
Yeah.
or who misses, or like the marketer who produces shit leads. It's always, you know, I'm the
It's
fall guy.
fine. It's fine.
You also need it when you're running a scam or something. You need someone to take the hit.
Yep.
And
I mean, you will be the one going to jail.
yeah,
for
I mean,
sure.
it's also in the show notes. It literally says fall guy, Mikkel. So what can you do? What can you do? Speaking
Also,
of,
whenever you're supposed to talk, it's not called Mikkel colon. It's kind of Fall Guy colon.
Yeah.
Fall Guy colon. Tony Fall Guy colon.
I just want to say for the record, we have fun. We have fun. We have fun.
Yeah.
We have fun. How many times do I need to say it before?
I think until you stop crying.
Over engineering intros. That's what we do.
Let's see,
I think
let's
that's
see.
how we're gonna get featured on Spotify.
Yeah,
Whatever.
let's go.
But we're gonna segue neatly again into the subject today,
Yeah.
which is how to acquire a customer and really our way of thinking about it. Our kind of, you know, if you subscribe, like you said, to our approach to problem solving and planning revenue and all that stuff, then there's definitely some, you know, 4 very specific problems and ways to think about them
Yeah.
we're going to get into.
So I think this episode is about we're talking a lot about this one approach of how to think about go-to-market and acquiring customers and using that approach because it's so logic-driven. You can use that approach in order to do an analysis. You can do it to a revenue plan. You can do it an operating model. All of these fancy things. But underlying is always a very straightforward logic, right? And we can call it, you know, the science of this and blah. I don't think that's super helpful. But, you know, if you use that logic for some of the problems that have been there for a while, and those are not big problems like, you know, compartmentalized problems. You won't walk into those problems every day. It's kind of a special thing. But they're usually kind of hard to crack.
Yeah.
And usually it's a really long discussion, one way or the other. And if you use the logic, though, that we're prescribing, so to speak, I think some of those problems will kind of fade away and be totally easy to solve suddenly. And I think that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah. And so we have 4. And I think before we just jump into the specifics, let's actually just cover them in case you want to skip over one way. Like, yeah, I know this already. I got it on control, not an issue.
Yeah.
Might be helpful. So the first one is...
multi-year discounts.
Yes.
So you have a multi-year deal. Rep comes to you. Hey, I can sign them on a multi-year deal. How much discount can we give them because of the multi-year?
Yeah.
Right. Question number 1.
And the other is partnership deals.
Yes.
How much do you actually pay for a partnership deal, right? So a case where you have a consultant or, you know, whatever, someone that is not operating within your business on your payroll,
Yes.
who needs a commission, obviously, from giving you that deal.
Yep. Another one is payment terms. Is it a good idea to give quarterly or annual? What's the reason to do either or the other? And what's the impact on your growth and on that customer?
Yeah. And then the last number 4 is really how much can you spend on acquiring a new customer? And I think this is especially also something that's going to be super interesting for, you know, the, you know, more top funnel team. So let's say if you're building outbound
Yep.
or you're running PLG or marketing, right? That element,
Yep.
there's going to be some important thoughts too. So
Beautiful.
So have your choice. There's like 4 items on the menu.
Well, they have to go this order though, otherwise people can't skip through it.
No, that's true.
Um,
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
logic person.
Fall
over
guy
here.
at
Yeah.
it again. Yeah.
Logic guy, fall
Yeah.
guy. Okay, so let's go with the multi-year discount. So there's usually obviously, hey, you know, if you go for the multi-year, 10% maybe is right, 20% is right. Sometimes it's 0% is right. So the question is, what is right for you? What is right for your business? And really the way you should be approaching it is, how much are you winning? Are you gaining by locking someone in for 2 years versus just 1? And the inverse here is churn. So if someone is going, renewing 1 year to the next, on average, how many people do you lose in that step? which is called churn, by the way. And that should give you a clear understanding of how much you want to pay in discount maximum to basically have that renewal step baked in from the beginning, right? That's how you need to think about it. And then in reality, what it basically means is if you have an annual churn of 90%, you should, for the multi-year, and you might give discounts for some other reasons, but for the multi-year reason, you should only give a discount of up to 10%. That's the only thing that makes sense. If you have 20% churn, you should kind of consider that. The tricky piece here is now, and very strong SaaS companies have started adopting that actually, to ditch multi-year discounts altogether. Why? Because their churn is so low and their upsell is so high that basically for signing someone on a multi-year, instead of giving a discount, they should be asking for a premium. Because the net retention rate is above 100%. They actually gain every year that they have that customer. So locking someone in for 2 years for the same price is actually that vendor is losing money on that deal.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, a pro tip here that we haven't talked about is you should consider exporting a bunch of your deals into a spreadsheet. Look at, is it multi-year? And then the discount. And then start figuring out, are we actually giving more discount than our churn? And do we potentially have, an upside here where we can generate more revenue by having some practices in place?
Yeah. Think about so again, there are different ways of discounting. You give a discount just because you want to give a discount. And then there is the specific multi-year discount. And think about trying, separate those two things. And the other piece is really giving discount for multi-year. In many cases, actually only makes sense if you get payment also this year already. So I basically, when we were kind of designing some of those schemes here, commission schemes and dinging people for specific discounts and so forth, we used that logic for the multi-year discount. Hey, it should be less than our annual churn. Yeah, that's how we put it in. And then we had an override, and it sounds all really complicated, but we had an override. If someone was willing to do multi-year, but multi-year upfront, we basically treated this deal commission-wise as a full this year deal.
Yeah.
Because it gave us so much, additional money. We're going to get, to this in point number 3. That's kind of good to keep in mind, right? I think the multi-year thing changes a little bit if you get all of that cash on day one, instead of, having it broken apart into payments or 2 years.
Yeah. Let's hop to partnerships.
Let's hop to partnership deals. So again, the setup here is you have a partnership motion, and then the conversation usually is, well, how much should we give this partner? And there are two main different trains of thought. One is a one-off, kind of commission-based, and the other one is recurring. They differentiate a lot in the way you need to think about it. But let me go specifically into the one-off. Yeah. And the way to think about comping your partners for their contribution and their deals that they're bringing in a one-off scenario is very similar to your thinking about CAC payback. Yeah. So number one, you might have partners that sit very much top of funnel that basically just send you leads.
Yeah.
And you still need to call them, you still need to book them, you still need to turn them into a customer and so forth. So in this case of a partnership arrangement where someone is really only sending you some top funnel leads, you need to realize that a fairly sizable chunk of your CAC payback or your CAC still sits with you. You still need to do all the heavy lifting. So the amount of money you should be paying that partner should be equivalent actually to what marketing needs to do in order to get something to this MQL stage or something like that, right? And that might not be enough or a lot, but that's how you need to think about it. Because again, all the other stuff still comes downstream, and you need to figure out, well, maybe they convert a little bit better. That then means you can pay them a little bit more versus differently, right?
Yeah.
And that might amount to, whatever number. And that is actually what you can pay those partners. If you have on the extreme opposite spectrum, a partner that doesn't only do the top funnel, but does also the sales process, and then basically closes this whole thing for you, the whole thing, the amount of money you can pay in the first year to this partner can be equal to your customer acquisition cost payback as a whole. So what does that actually mean? It basically means you can give that partner 100%, and in some cases even 150% of the first year deal value. Yeah. So again, translated, if you have a 20,000 euro deal that you didn't touch, it was delivered to your doorstep and is new customer, today. And usually you're paying around 1.5 of that. So 18-month CAC payback, or 30,000 euros to acquire that 20,000 euros. Instead of giving your partner the usual 20, 25, and when you reach 30% of the initial deal value, you can actually give your partner 150% and you're still making bank.
Yeah.
Right? And that way of thinking about compensating or paying money for your partnership deals, I haven't seen that many places. And your CFO will balk and be like, oh, are you crazy? 150%? I've never seen this in my career. 25% is, the norm and so forth. That's true. And especially when you're established, maybe you can force those percentages, and that will be fantastic for your CAC payback.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're early on, maybe you need to kind of get the partnership side cranking, and maybe then you maybe want to overpay.
Yeah.
However, that thing completely shifts, obviously, if you have a recurring setup with your partner, and one or the other thing sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't, right? But if you're initially only on a commission base for the deal for your partner, and they do all the heavy lifting for you, you can basically pay them as much as your CAC payback would be.
And I think also this is a point where we shouldn't get into the nitty gritty of it, but usually we'll structure an agreement with that partner, and that's where you can lock them in so they don't potentially switch to a competitor if you are in a competitive space, right? So there are tricks you can use all of a sudden when you know or realize that, oh wow, we can actually pay a lot more.
But think about it. So let's just say you have a partner, and usually, depending on what it is, implementation partner or whatever, they will usually have many of you, and usually their reps can only push one of these different solutions.
Yeah. And
this is how it simply works. If the rep gets more money by pushing you versus someone else, they obviously will push you, right? And if you can afford to pay instead of 25%, 30%, that then will be part of the commission scheme for that partnership rep. If you can go way higher than that, you have a much higher chance of them bringing you up and talking about you and saying, no, actually, solution XYZ, I think this is our preferred choice. You should totally go with that, right? And this is where this can be super handy and can create a bit of a competitive advantage. How sustainable is it? I don't know. I haven't thought through this, but that is certainly one way of how to kind of getting out with partners sometimes.
At least it opens up the playing field for you to find the right setup and solution. So if you're only paying 25% today and everyone is happy and is running, I mean, we're not advocating for you to then go and bump it up to 150, but knowing that you have opportunities.
No, I think one cool way how we use it actually is you give partners basically a scale. Many times that happens. If you bring so many deals per month, per quarter, per year, you're in this bracket. If you're in this, if you bring us so many, then in that bracket. And suddenly, you start on 25 something percent, but then you go into, well, if you reach this bracket over here, we actually will pay you 100% per customer that you bring. I can just see how some partners will be like, oh, wow, these guys are stupid. Let's totally go with this thing here.
Yeah.
And I think there's some incentive schemes here that work for partners that many people just haven't thought about it in that kind of sense.
Should we move to the next?
Let's do the next.
So, payment terms, I think it says.
Yes, payment terms. So, this one is a bit this one is a bit convoluted potentially. Let's see how we unpack it. So the basic idea is, and this is a mid-market sale.
Yeah.
You ask for 10, 20, 50,000 euros, and you ask for full year upfront payment. Sometimes that's it's just easy. It's one purchasing order. If you deal with those kind of customers, it's one invoice, it's one transfer, it's one thing. But obviously, people are cash sensitive. Procurement departments get a little plus ones if they figure out those payment terms better. And basically, the payment term here that we're talking about is not when, kind of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later.
No.
It is how many installments.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, right? And someone is asking you for quarterly. The question now is this deal worth, less? Not worthless, but worth less than it was before? Yes or no, right? And now you can attack it from two ways. Well, number one, if I close it on the quarterly versus the annual, but it speeds up the process, so kind of a quasi discount, basically, then maybe that's good because my sales cycles go down. That's a plus one. We get more efficient by actually offering this, right? And I think in that sense, you could say CAC payback stays the same, right? Because it doesn't matter. So CAC payback underlying doesn't actually have the cash collection piece to it. This, different ratio. So you actually, it's a discount you can give that is non-CAC payback impacting, if you will, right? So in that sense, it's kind of cool. So why not go for it? Why not do monthly? I mean, come on, let's go, right? The alternative way around it to look at it and say, well, no, actually we need to push for the annual instead, and we're rather happy to give a little bit of a discount to get the annual, is really in the sense of the ability to recycle the cash.
Yeah.
So you have acquired a customer. You almost get all, not usually not all, but most of it you get back within the first invoice. Let's just say you have a 18-month CAC payback, so 1.5 years. You get the first year fully upfront. So out of these 18 months, in your first invoice, you get 12 months paid back immediately. The cool thing now is you can take those 12 months and reinvest it into your customer acquisition engine immediately, right? And let's just say there was no timing constraint, that closes and recycles immediately and you close again. If you imagine that, then if your CAC payback is more than one, then it will just get smaller and smaller and smaller how much money you can recycle from the same customer, basically. And if it is one, it basically is an infinite kind of equation. Let's pause with that, right? But that's the idea, right? If you're able to recoup that cash that you spent on acquiring that customer within the first invoice, you are then able to take that money, put it back into hiring more SDRs, hiring more marketing folks, and then generating more cash coming out of that. If you phase it out, if you have monthly maybe or quarterly, basically it will take longer and longer and longer for you to then take that money and put it back into the engine, right? And you can now run a couple of different models on this. I'm sure that someone has that somewhere. And you will see that the organization that is able to ask for the money up front and then is able to push that money back into the revenue engine is able to grow much, much faster than the other one, right? So is the deal now worth space less because you switch from quarterly from annual to quarterly? I would, it's a very, very tricky one, and I would actually lean on the, it probably is a little bit worth less. And yes, you should totally try and you can translate this into a commission scheme basically for your reps. I think you should ding them. I think you should ding them for lesser payment terms than you set out for.
Yeah, I mean, because you have the money on the table for a longer period of time. So a lot can happen. And you also, you there are going to be customers who have a hard time paying on time. So there's a lot of factors that can go into this.
Yes.
But having that, reassurance that, okay, they paid invoice number 1, that's 12 months in the bank.
Yes. And, you could almost go the other way around. You could offer a discount to go annual, which is in fact what a lot of SMBs are doing.
Yeah.
Right? You go on the website, you either have monthly or you have the annual. I just saw it broke your brain there for a second, actually. When
No, this is common.
no, I mean, for SMB it's common, but for mid-market it's not common.
No,
kind
no,
of
no.
offer a discount to go annual. SMBs, it's kind of a normal thing, right? You have monthly versus annual. And if you go with the annual option, then, it costs 20% less. The logic here is slightly different, though. The logic here is not necessarily the ability to reinvest your money. It's part of it. The other logic actually is that in SMB, payment terms frequently or usually equal contract length. So if you connect your credit card and it's monthly, it means you can cancel monthly.
Yeah.
If you connect your credit card and say annually, that then means really your contract length is for the whole year, right? And then the discount is less so on recycling the cash. It's part of it. But the discount is basically set at a level that is higher than your expected churn for the year.
Yeah.
Basically, if you give, if your monthly churn is 30-40%, which is not unusual in SMB necessarily, and you put the annual discount to 20%, you're basically making money in that situation, right? And that's why it's set up like that.
I think we should move to the last. You can drink your coffee. We need to move to the last one. So how much can you actually spend on acquiring a customer then?
Yeah. And I think this is really valuable for
Me.
people sitting a little bit higher up the funnel.
Okay. Yeah.
I
I thought you were gonna say in the org.
We need another sign here, and no, it's really valuable for people sitting a little bit higher up in the funnel. To use this to rationalize the things that they're doing with the output that they're getting, right? And I think you and I recently discussed for example, meetups. Yeah. So we are currently doing meetup monthlies. So meetup on a monthly cadence, different cities. Please join us, ping us where we should have one.
It's not just the two of us meeting up. It's
it's
for
that's right.
people interested in.
So it's around revenue operations. We usually have like 2 speakers. It's fantastic. And we were thinking, how much money should we actually be spending on this?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a customer acquisition kind of motion. It would be cool if that came out of it. But really thinking about how much we want to, how much we are spending to, well, what if we were to get a customer every other meetup or whatever?
Yeah.
Then we quickly realized, actually, no, I think we're doing okay. I think the money that we're spending and the money that we're potentially getting, I think those two things equal totally out. Not having a clear attribution like, hey, A leads to B and so forth. But also another example that I ran into the other day was basically about, and maybe it doesn't fit perfectly, but was basically about like a webinar, right, that someone is hosting. And someone is, let's just say they're spending, I don't know, a bunch of money on LinkedIn in order to promote the webinar, right? And I was like, you know what? Instead of using all of this money to put into promotions, we're talking tens of thousands of euros here. We're not talking small money. You could actually take this money, fly in and like maybe not an A-list, but a B-list player into your studio, you record it, and just by the way of the name and, because it's so interesting and maybe some word of mouth and some reshares and stuff, you would probably get even more traffic than you buying it, right? So really kind of the realization, hey, I could spend 50,000 euros to get, I don't know, I don't have a great example, Michelle Obama or something like that. I think like a president, like a former president, I think you can book Obama, obviously kind of if you're interesting enough, for north of $100,000. I think
You've been looking into this.
Yeah, no, honestly, I have actually, because he was at Bits and Pretzels 2 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And the question is not, can you afford to get him? Usually that's not the problem, but will he bother to show up, basically, right? Kind of, you need to make it kind of, in that sense, worthwhile. But you're talking for an hour speaking gig, even for those A-list players, you're talking, probably 50,000 euros or something like that. Yeah. And then, how much organic traffic would you get from this? And does that potentially then fit, your customer profiles? And thinking about these problems like that makes it, I don't know, it changes the equation for me in my head sometimes. Yeah. So that's why attacking from this angle is, I think, super interesting. But I think you had like a different perspective on this.
No, I think it's sometimes you see a company rent a yacht and invite people onto the yacht, and you go, "This is bonkers. This is so expensive. What are they thinking?" But the reality is, you might think more about how can you be cost efficient in your acquisition, when in fact you might be completely underspending. So let's say you spend, I don't know, €1,000 for a marketing sourced opportunity, but the business is okay with you paying 10,000. Mm-hmm. Then that completely changes how you go to market in marketing. That might change where you choose to put money in terms of advertising. There's chatter around LinkedIn being more expensive than, for example, other social networks. But that might all of a sudden mean, well, the math is totally going to work out for you. And the math of hiring an A-lister or doing a roadshow or whatever it is, bringing in that extra headcount might make completely sense. And I think that is actually the important realization that, yes, it's always good to be frugal and be, aware of cost, but that cost you're basing it off, is it a figment of imagination or is it math? Did someone actually tell you this is actually the level?
And maybe it's either a fifth bullet or it's a sub-segment of this one here. How do you figure out, especially in the marketing side, how do you figure out how much money you want to spend on an opportunity? And bunch of math and blah, we can talk about it. But what might be easier, just as a comparison, is if you have a outbound team that is creating opportunities, it might be very easy for you from the marketing side to figure out how much you're paying per opportunity. Basically, you take the outbound cost as a whole, divided by the amount of opportunities that the team generated. Usually, those are two numbers you can easily get.
Yeah. Even
finance will give you the sum total of that outbound team. And suddenly you get a number that will range from 1,000 to 10,000 euros, by the way.
Yeah.
And that is the number to be in the realm of on your marketing side as well. That's how I would see it. And if you're vastly more expensive, maybe don't tell anyone in the org about that. But if you're vastly cheaper, I think there's an opportunity for you to rethink some of these things, kind of ask for more budget. Yeah. Obviously, that's then that conversation. And then have the ability to do some stuff that is a bit, outlier and crazy. Yeah. I saw some folks doing ads on cabs in New York City.
You've been talking about it for years.
Yes, it will happen eventually. It's not that expensive.
No.
I looked into TV ads. Not that expensive. Everyone is throwing a bunch of money on Facebook and LinkedIn. Few people realize how cheap TV and radio actually is in comparison. Out of home, this whole, poster thing, none of that is actually so expensive. But, once you start thinking with this hat on, like, hey, this is the money we could actually spend on some of those things, having that in comparison is extremely useful sometimes.
The only caveat I have to this point is...
Just one?
Just one. What's going to happen if I realize that I can pay 3x for an opportunity and I go and ask for the budget? There's going to be some challenges there baked in. Maybe it's an entirely different episode. I'm sorry for bringing it up, but I can just see that being okay, Tony Mikkel. Yeah. Good. You're telling me I can actually pay 3K, not 1K for a marketing source opportunity, but finance, they're saying no.
So I think the answer needs to be, you need to compare those two channels. And then you need to ask the finance guy the question, why are we paying 3 times more for this opportunity than for that opportunity if they're behaving the same, or mine even potentially behaves better? Great question to ask. You can leave it right there and then, let that person simmer on that one, because that will be there will be some thought that's happening there. And I think then, once you have opened up that argument, the next question then will be, well, okay, Mikkel, on the marketing side, how you actually gonna spend 3x the budget? And it's like, well, I'm gonna put it into Facebook, and then everyone was like, wow, that doesn't work out. So I think getting the budget and then finding good ways to take it in a scalable manner, two different things though. But start opening up the conversation by comparing those two different channels and be like, hey, what I'm doing, what they're doing, what doesn't matter. Vastly different. Why is it vastly different? Actually, I think that's a much better question to ask than I need more budget.
And I think it's also, it's easy to increase the CAC to triple, but you want to get output.
That's it. You figured it out, Mikkel.
I'm so good at acquisition.
Okay, perfect.
Wonderful. I hope this was an interesting way to think about some of these conundrums. There are definitely more you can jump into, but just, try and use it. Try and look at some of the discounting elements on multi-year deals. Try and look on how you go about terms to fuel the business. At the end of the day, these are 4 very specific areas where you potentially could fuel a bit more growth.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thanks, Mikkel.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, listener. Bye.